a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a ride.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expounding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Thomas Gorins, welcome to the show, man. You are also known as Paranoid American, the conspiracy occult comics. And, dude, you're fascinating. I've had you on for a live a couple years ago, I think, and I don't know, I have no reason why it took us this long. I think because you and I are just crushing it at life in general. Finally, our schedules lined up to have you on, man. It's good to see you, brother. How are you?
Well, we were beefing too, but we squashed the beef. We're happy to report the beef has been squashed. We've taken back all those weird things we were saying about each other, so we're on awesome terms now. So
they're gonna
thank you for having me on. Water under the bridge, man. Let's just never bring it up again.
I love you. So all the ways to find him, of course, located down in the show description. Your linkpop.com, which includes your Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or X, or whatever the fuck they're calling it now. Dude, if you don't mind for the audience, just let us know who you are, brother. That whole rigmarole.
Yep. I mean, Paranoid American. My name is actually Thomas Gorins. And I do comic books. I've been working in comic books for 15 plus years, self-published. Although it's not all just rinky-dink, I've got a pretty decent operation going. I started it while I was at Disney, had, Disney illustrators and animators and voiceover artists working with me on a lot of the early stuff. Once I left Disney, I didn't have the budget to keep, having those people work on stuff, because it was one thing to do it during lunch and another thing to have them do it after hours or, out. So anyways, I just wanted to keep that train rolling. And here I am over a decade later, and expanding into more and more stuff pretty much every week or month. Everyone I know has tried to do an intervention, say, slow down, you're doing too many things, focus on one thing at a time, and they just don't know who I am. I can't even focus on 10 things at a time.
The plates you spin are fascinating, man. So again, all the ways to find him, guys, located down below. Highly recommend. I've got your I didn't grab it, but I've got some stuff that you sent me, man, and it's amazing. The work that you do, the type of subject matter that you focus on. Again, the conspiracy and occult comics. Do you call it occult or occulate? Have you heard this argument or this conversation?
I haven't heard that. I just say occult because it's always I've always heard it.
Yeah, samesies, but I heard it recently called occulate, and it's because it's, all about sight and an oculist and all of that kind of stuff, and now I can't unsee it that way. So anyway, just maybe another thing.
It can get confusing because there's occultists, but there's also oculists.
Oculists, right.
And oculists was a secret society in the 1700s that it was kind of quasi-Masonic, but they based all of their teachings and rituals around eyesight. And they would all pretend to be, they might have all been surgeons or eye doctors, but all the rituals had to do with someone lost an eye and it's oh no, I'm never going to see again. It's also supposed to be metaphorical for, seeing and enlightenment and stuff. But yeah. So there are occult oculists as well. So if you called it a oculist, it would sound weird because then it's I'm an oculist.
Yes. It's just the way you pronounce it and the way you look at it, right? Literally the way you look at it. Ironically, having to do with eyes. And do you think it's deeper? Maybe the third eye had anything to do with that? We're thinking of the eye symbolism where they start covering one and everything. Maybe, there's something to the apprehension of the pronunciation of a word so that it deviates our, sight just a little bit.
I mean, the third eye is, it goes over so many different cultures. The best way I've described it is kind of in Masonic terms too. But when you talk about light, there's the visual light, right? But you can also feel light, in a very real way. So if you go up to, a candle that's burning, true, you're feeling the heat that's created from the combustion of, the light, but it is light. So there is a physical property to light. There's a visual property to light. And then there's also maybe this third or fourth version. So that third eye is representative of that third version of light that's not the visible and it's not the physical that you can feel, but there's still a way that you can sense that there's light around, even if it's not your eyes and even if it's not your skin, there's still like this extra feeling. I think that's kind of maybe what people get at when they say third eye. It's like being able to, like, you know, having the eye to see. It doesn't mean like your eyeballs. It means like that other sensory perception that you have to kind of have it open, because you can just easily have it closed and not be able to see it.
Yeah, it's like this clear indication of that there's something bigger going on, but you need a certain type of vision, not this limited literal ocular vision, but maybe oculists have another vision that they're able to tap into and kind of maybe articulate.
And we've got that vision for sale on paranoidamerican.com, Black Friday sale, all enlightenment, guaranteed to open your third eye, money back, guaranteed.
Speaking of segues, dude, please tell us about some stuff that you got over there, because I just love your shit. It's amazing.
So what? How adult can we get?
We can get very. You're not censored anywhere, sir.
So the very last comic that just wrapped up, and people I think can still grab copies of it, but it's called Frazzle Drip Funhouse. This is going to be a wild juxtaposition segue into the next one, but Frazzle Drip Funhouse is a love letter to 80s and 90s like slasher horror movies, like the cheesier and the bloodier and just the more absurdly over the top, the better. So we just turned that into a comic book, and then hence the name Frazzle Drip Funhouse. It's essentially a cross between Five Nights at Freddy's and Pizzagate, right? So it takes place in the basement of a pizza, arcade parlor, and it's run by these Satanist elitists that are extracting adrenochrome from, kidnapped children. And essentially one of the animatronic animals comes to life because it gets a little bit of adrenochrome or whatever the gold juice is, right? They spill a little bit on it and it basically takes over and gets ultimate revenge against all the evildoers. So it's very much like a story of vengeance and like a nice real resolution. Very good, happy, feel good story. Definitely not for kids at all. There's very gruesome and graphic scenes. And the other one we're working on is chaostwins.com, which is a family friendly book that I'm doing with Sam Tripoli about two twin girls and a bunch of friendly cryptid friends. Little Biggie is like the little Bigfoot version. There's also Mathilda, who's like a moth girl, not a moth man. Shout out to all the little cryptids. And the chupacabras, and they take down nostalgia, essentially. The whole concept is that they're fighting back against weaponized nostalgia, and that this new generation of youth are the only ones that can sort of avoid it, right? They can be Neo in the Matrix of nostalgia because they don't have the same nostalgia as all the boomer parents have got. Like, they're this new wave that talks in a new language that no one else understands exactly. So those are the two big ones. And man, I mean, we could spend 4 hours going over everything else that I got coming out. You just tell me when to stop.
Please give us a few that you have coming out. And you have this Hunter Biden party kit or starter pack or whatever. Will you please tell us about this?
I'll grab one in a sec. We'll do like a little like intermission or something.
Do a show and tell, please. Yes, I would love that. Yeah.
Because I just got everything all packed up. So
we got time, guys. Check the video version in the show description down there to see, of course, Thomas's handsome ass, and then see the stuff that he's going to show us here. But again, guys, all the ways to find Tim, YouTube, and all located down below. So when you worked at Disney, was that the closest you've ever worked to Nazis, or is there another time?
I was in the military too, so
okay, got you. Yeah, you
could probably make that argument even more so.
Thank you for your service.
I grew up in Long Island, and I learned recently that was the last big holdout for Nazis in the U.S. There was a little section of Long Island that literally had like Hitler Street and Himmler Boulevard and Mengele, Avenue and stuff. And they kept those names even throughout World War II. Like, they didn't even repeal any of that stuff until the war was like okay, there's a clear loser, at least maybe not a winner. There's a clear loser, and it wasn't the Weimar Republic, reborn. So, but I think that was probably the closest. Although I didn't know it at the time. My grandparents definitely weren't Nazis; they were Italians. So if anything, they were like fascists, not socialists.
That's fair.
That's not true. I love you, Grandma and Grandpa. They weren't.
Thank you, Nona.
So sorry, Nana and Pop. I didn't mean that.
So, other than your grandparents and the Nazis, what else? What is that? What got you interested in comics? Like, what drove you to just be obsessed with comics? Like the same way I am, honestly. You and I share so many things with our just love of tangible, fucking awesome visual. Beautiful things. Look, again, I'm gonna post this. We were talking earlier about a book that I just got, and we were both just geeking out over the illustrations in this. I'm gonna give a shout out to Lost Lands, Forgotten Realms by Bob Curran, illustrated by Ian Daniels, and look at that. It's just some dope shit wrapped around a book that's discovered the secret places that time forgot. And you and I love shit like this. Like, why do we love stuff like this? What was your first thing that was like, I want that?
I mean, even that book reminds me of X-Men in like the Savage Land, right? Where they go and there's pterodactyls flying around. They got to shoot them all down. I mean, I don't know how much of it was me liking comics as much as comics being marketed directly towards me, like our entire, because I mean, they had the Sega Genesis games and you'd go to Walmart or Kmart and it would all be X-Men shirts, and you go to the arcade and it was all Ninja Turtles and X-Men arcade games and stuff. So you kind of had to actively ignore it to not get swept up in it. But as soon as I saw those blades come out of Wolverine's hands and put Cyclops in his place for being that uppity, snobby asshole that he was, I was like, okay, I get this way more than I ever got the other comics that I read. Although even before that, man, the very first comic that I remember like looking forward to and going to the store and grabbing a copy, not because someone else told me to, because I liked it, was called Ralph Snart, I think. And it was like a prototypical Bart Simpson. Like before Bart Simpson existed, it was this like snotty kid that would like go to hell and annoy the devil. Or like would just, it was very wild, man. It had some of that surrealism that I later saw in Sam Keith's Max. I don't know if you know the Max series.
No.
But it's where like this guy that perhaps has like a mental issue also sees that he's living in a completely different reality, but he's sort of like a warrior in this reality. But in the normal reality, he's probably just a guy that's, completely out of it and homeless and unhelpable. But he's the opposite of that in this alternate reality that he lives in. And there's this girl that links the two because she'll show up in his wild reality, but then she also is like taking care of in natural reality. Anyways, I love those sort of stories. And I remember gravitating towards that and away from Superman, Batman, Aquaman. Like if it was blank man, like I didn't want to hear about it. You know what I mean? Like if it was Wolverine man, I probably wouldn't have liked it.
That's fair. Yeah.
Shout out Iceman. Iceman was cool. But
Iceman was all right. Yeah.
He was all right.
What? So, and this is the thing, right? It's story, and I love that you brought up X-Men because that was my that's still one of my favorite things ever. I actually named the studio Cerebro because of that. It's what amplifies Charles Xavier's message, right? And so this is woven into the fabric of us. And yes, it was marketed really, really well and really got in there. And I'm not going to rule that out either. But at a point, you and I had a decision to move on into like adult shit, and get into the Real Housewives of whatever and sports and talk about the market and stuff like that. And we didn't. You and I chose to retain our imagination. And not only that, you and I chose, occupations, let's say, or avenues of our paths in life that are consumed with imagination and creativity and story. So, what is that? Do you think that it was marketed so well, or do you think that there's something deeper to that you were just destined to do something like this?
I think some people gravitate towards wanting to just tell stories, and in the right context, it's really successful and they make stories for everyone. In the wrong context, they're just habitual liars. You know what I mean? That's also kind of a person that just compels to tell stories constantly. So luckily, I feel like I'm more in the former instead of the latter. But it's like, this is something that I would have to do no matter what. And, the people in my immediate vicinity are probably sick of hearing all the weird, wacky ideas. And, but once you put it on paper, it can go and it can find its tribe out there, right? Sometimes the tribe's not even within driving distance from me, but like the tribe is 100% out there. And, some people end up seeing like what it's about. I don't know. It's really hard. Like if you were to go to a comic convention, right? A lot of the people there are going to see like the things that they're told are the cool things, like all the TV shows and movies and trailers and like that marketing stuff. And it's harder and harder for me to figure out where that line is. Like here's a good litmus test, right? did you like He-Man as a kid too?
Not really, honestly. I didn't really get into He-Man.
Because He-Man was an example of the product existing first, and then it was like, okay, make this appealing to kids so that they watch it and they buy it. It's not like He-Man came packaged with a whole backstory and a whole hero cycle of atonement and all of that. It was just like, nah, dude, like, we'll make it and he'll have muscles and we'll make it with this kind of processing.
Green Tiger,
like,
yeah.
Oh crap, instead of just making commercials, this could be a TV show. Like, it'll be a commercial. It'll just be a really long commercial. You know what I mean? Like, and that kind of, the same thing with G.I. Joe, you could say, is another really good example where it was a product first. It was a doll, for your parents. And then it was like, okay, we need to hype up the marketing for this guy. And it turns into a TV show. So anyway, that's one of my unofficial, very sort of subjective litmus tests for not for like testing other people, but just like yourself, of like, how much do you like Ninja Turtles versus He-Man? How much do you like X-Men versus, G.I. Joe? Like the things that 100% started with a product to get marketed towards you versus the things that maybe started as stories, got popular enough to warrant ancillary products that then got marketed to you. So in that way, it's like, you get slipped a Mickey, but you wake up and it's like kind of a cool place that you woke up in and you enjoy being there, as opposed to the bad version of that.
Damn. I mean, what a breakdown and analysis, and it's perfect. It's a brilliant way that you look at it. So again, it's not just about comics. I mean, there's psychology in this. It's fascinating. Again, what you're able to glean off of this. So what is what's your favorite project that you're looking forward to that you're working on right now? I definitely want to make sure that we talk about that.
So I got two. Oh man, I'll do my top three.
Okay.
So the first one I've been working on like for 4+ years, and finally I'm ready to start promoting it. And it's called Never a Straight Answer, NASA. It's about Stanley Kubrick directing the moon landings. That one's gonna be so fun, but I'll splurge more about that later, because it's literally like it's ready to go. It wants to go, but I just haven't let it out of the box yet, because it takes more. You can't just like let them out into the world. You have to kind of like set them up and make sure that they got a place to stay and friends to live with, so before you just like kick them out of the house. So that's one of them, is NASA. The next one is called Mold, and it's about it's based on a true story of a lunch lady that I knew in high school, but she has a sentient toenail fungus that connects her into a hollow earth kind of realm where mycelium and mushrooms kind of run all of reality. And they convince her to go back into, above ground and get revenge on these horrible little shits in the school in like really crazy and surreal ways. So that one's called Mold. It's a lunch lady revenge tale. A lot of revenge tales lately.
That's like the coolest couple of sentences together I've ever heard in my life. Like, think about like the imagination that is and how you tap into that. But then you also tap into the Jules Verne's idea of these gigantic mushrooms down there in inner Earth. So you're tying all of the really cool Agarthian mythology and everything together. But in such an awesome way, by making the character a lunch lady. Like, what a fascinating,
and crass. It's very crass.
Yeah, and it's a toe fungus.
It's definitely not like highbrow whatsoever, and that's kind of how I like it. I like getting down in the dirt and calling things how they are. And then the last one, not the last one, but the third one that I'll mention is called Illuminati, Naughty. And I'm still working on like the full title so that you can read it and know exactly what it is. So right now I think the working title is Illuminati Occult Erotica Exposed. I think that's maybe, because then you kind of like understand maybe what it's about. But it is over 100 pages graphic novel of like graphically detailed erotic fiction that covers, for example, there's a rumor that Barbara Bush's mom, Pauline Pierce, might have had a little sexual escapade with Aleister Crowley at some point. Well, we imagine that, let's say that's true. Well, here's what that looks like in graphic detail with, Aleister Crowley plowing Pauline Pierce in all their glory. There's another one about Edward Kelly and John Dee, and Edward Kelly like banged John Dee's wife because he convinced them that the angel Uriel said that he needed to in order to get some So that one we also illustrated in full detail, and there's 6 other ones.
Wow. Dude, again, just love the approach you take on this because it's a no fucks. It's so creative. I just love everything about this. I can't brag on you enough. So again, guys, not to brag on this guy enough, but all the way is located down below to find him. So let's talk about your adult occult Disney series that you have going on. What got that started? Obviously, your ties to Disney. I'm curious about asking about stories about Disney, but I feel like you've been probably asked those enough, so you don't have to share any of them. I'm curious about your Occult Disney series, but also, anything weird at Disney that just sort of put the hairs on end on you whenever you walked through that place or worked with the
Mine are, I guess, more like practical. It's less like I walked in and there was people sacrificing a baby. Right? I don't have that one, but I do have one. I walked into like the little control because I worked, behind the scenes. So I would like go into little control booths here and there. And you wouldn't even guess. It just looks like fake little facades, but inside there are like a Vegas casino, dudes on computers and cameras all over the place. And there was this one time that I was just waiting for someone to finish their job because we were doing an art installation, and I'm like watching what's going on, and the guys are in real time watching the line of people at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. It's the one you go in a little boat and it floats around. Well, you could see like it alerting that they had like the line had gotten to some kind of a critical mass, and that at the same time that this line is getting the critical mass, there's a restaurant that's like, within walking distance, like 2 minutes walking distance, and they've got tortilla chips that are about to get too cold to serve. So they basically start pumping like fajita smells and like the sounds of sizzling, not real fajitas, by the way, like sounds of sizzling into the park, and then have someone go out and like announce that they're doing like half off or whatever. And you just see in real time people literally peeling off of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and going into this restaurant. But the way they did it was timed out because they know that the average time that someone would sit in that restaurant would be roughly about 40 minutes. And that if you were at the end of the line, you were basically going to be waiting there for 40 minutes until you even got to the front anyways. And that by the time that like lunch rush kind of died down, when they left the restaurant and they got back into line, they wouldn't have to wait as long as if they had stayed there. But all this stuff is down to a science and AI driven. And it was not that anyone sat down and like they were smart enough, they saw all this going. It was just like the computer software was like, hey, here's this line of people with a little red line on it, and here's a little, indicator over the restaurant with a green line on it. And all they had to do was like hit a button, and it like connected all the pieces and like made all that stuff kind of happen. And then seeing it actually happen, it was like, whoa, dude, like it was like if you really could have some kind of mind control dial where you're just like, go shop and you just crank it up. They kind of have that there, but it's because you're already at Disney, right? You've already spent money to be there. So you're kind of in the mood to spend anyways. You're probably going to be hungry or thirsty at some point just from the physical activity. So it's not a hard sell. So all it takes is people to just kind of like nudge you or bump you. And I just wonder how many people in line realize that they didn't actually, like, it wasn't their own decision to be like, you know what, I'm not going to stand here anymore. I'm kind of hungry. Let's go grab something to eat and come back. They probably thought they were a genius. Like, oh, that worked out great. Can you believe that, folks? You know what I mean? But really, that was the Disney guys, like, just making sure that there weren't blockages, because you don't want a whole bunch of people blocking up part of the park and then have this empty restaurant. You want it all to kind of have activity going. So, like, that level of orchestration, I don't think a single person could do that. That's like this corporate, like a amalgamation, or I don't know, like a Enneagram or something.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
You know what?
It's some crazy voodoo shit. It is knowing how people operate, and it is a form of mind control. But is it? So, do you consider it morally, I guess, ethical? And what does that mean? To sort of steer people in a right direct, in that direction.
I do think it's more. I mean, if you have to say yes or no to a question, I don't like to sit on the fence. So I'd say yes, it's morally ethical, but asterisk, I would turn it back into like a Socratic line of questioning to who was asking that question, right? So I would pose it and say, if you're born with charisma and you don't understand that like how you do the charisma that you do, you're just naturally appealing and you just naturally pick up on social cues very easily, right? is it unethical that you're just naturally charismatic versus someone that is naturally uncharismatic, that is socially awkward, maybe even slightly on the spectrum? Like, is there an ethical good or bad in those two scenarios?
And it's a beautiful thing you point out, because then it's used as a weapon against you. Intelligence used as a weapon against you. And if you're the smarter one in your family, people put you, it's crabs in a bucket then. It's an interesting you point out here, because it is psychological at any level. And we know that this place is fucking full of distractions, full of little bright lights and keys that are jingling to get your attention and shit. And so to utilize them, and that's why it was a question, it's just a philosophical one, honestly, because there is no, I don't think, right or yes or no to it. I think there is a yes and no. It's a yes and.
Yeah, like a button, it just goes straight to hell. Like a trap door opens up under. Oh, wrong. Wrong answer.
But then they just pop back in line where they are here. You know, that's all hell is. It's the back of the line at Disney. Just where you were, you're just 5 minutes further in hell than you were.
It's
right?
back of the line at Disney without taking that break to get a margarita.
Yeah. But you can smell all the fucking chips and sizzle and hear it and shit.
Yeah, but you're fighting it. You're like, no, it's a trap. They're trying to lure me there.
I'm waiting.
They're like, they are, but also maybe you want some chips. You just didn't realize it. I don't know. And I think that's why it's ethical, is because if you're not good at it, or if you don't do it instinctually, then it's probably in your advantage to learn how to like actively apply charisma, or like build rapport with intention, right? Some people can just walk into a room, start building rapport with everyone because of the it factor, whatever the hell that is. And then some people don't. But if that person sits down and reads a book, and they formulaically go out in society and like, today I'm going to ask 50 people, how their day is going, just to break that feeling of, approaching and like the rejection. If you go through this systematically, almost like you're a little scientist out there experimenting, is that unethical just because you weren't born with all that? The same, like if you're an artist, right? And you're just right out the womb, which isn't a true thing, but let's say right out the womb, you just got like this artistic talent. You just got an eye for light and volume and gestalt, versus someone that has to go to school and learn it. Is that person like unethical because they're like manipulating things unnaturally? Like it's a really weird gray area to be in. So I really do think that social interaction and charisma and all that, it's kind of like an art form. So people can use art form for good and bad, but as a whole, I would say art is ethical, full stop.
An outstanding answer. What a fucking outstanding answer. Because it is psychology, and it's just, in one perspective, it's just offering an alternative to waiting in line for 40 minutes. And then also, pairing it with an opportunity to get rid of some tortilla chips that are about to go out. It's win-win, and no harm was done to it, but there was clear manipulation. But it's done all over the place. But again, like you said, you got free will here. You have the ability to say, fuck that, I'm waiting in this line, and y'all go eat your chips. And then the dude comes back, stands right next to you with a full belly, and then you're just like, oh, what the fuck,
Yeah, and then you're mad, right? And now you're like, oh, it's fair. This isn't fair.
Yeah. Bunch of Oculus anyway. So tell me about your Occult Disney series that you had, man. So what made you start drawing those connections? And just tell me a couple of your favorites.
Well, it kicked off because I was on Tinfoil Hat, and we just did like a episode on Walt Disney himself and his history in Desmoulins, and a bunch of really weird, like he was kind of being like white-mailed or like a good version of bribe by the FBI to report on communists. But anyways, that was where it all kicked off. And then from there, I did a show with Matt Comegys, who does Oral Hygiene podcast. And we just did one on Fantasia in particular. And I jumped at the ability to do that, because trying to cram like every Disney movie and every Disney conspiracy theory and story into one episode with Sam and the crew, right, and Johnny and XG, it's like you can only focus on so much, and you can't do the entire Disney library, right, in an hour and a half. So we did Fantasia, and that one was so fun. We were like, you know what, let's just go to the very first Disney theatrical animation and watch them all in order, start to end. And that's kind of what Occult Disney's been, is just started with Fantasia, where we kind of establish this theory that's not entirely mine for sure, but that Fantasia itself is a true magical ritual that brings Disney into reality. And by the proof being that Disney is realer than any individual person is, it will live longer in any individual person. It's thought about more times by more people more often than any other individual person. So it's a very real thing. and then every other movie leading up to that and afterwards is kind of a reconfirmation of all of this. So it's been such a fun and a great reason to go back and watch, like, what am I going to watch Beauty and the Beast for? I don't have a daughter or anything, so what am I going to watch Beauty and the Beast for again, the classic? So now I got a reason to watch all these in retrospect.
That is awesome, especially the Atlantis one. Like, they had some really esoteric shit that they were doing, man. Even like when you get to the stuff like Fern Gully and all those kind of things, right? I mean, it's going to be riddled with these patterns, with these symbols that are just throughout all of this stuff. And it's interesting too when you look at. There was one I saw about Winnie the Pooh and the Jungle Book kid, the kid. And it was the exact same animation that was used, and all they did was change the background and the character out. Do you think it's like that with templates in movies, but with the symbolism and messaging being offered, that it's templistic, if you will, throughout the production?
Yeah, I mean, because the template is Grimm fairy tales, essentially, or whatever that plot line is. And there's usually a very similar formula that they produce with. There's also just the natural storytelling formula that Disney would apply to everything. Like, for example, like Jungle Book's a good example, where he went and found the animators that were working on it, and he basically asked them, he was like, has anyone here read the original Jungle Book? No? Okay, good. Don't, because we're not doing that. We're doing Walt Disney's Jungle Book. And it kind of like supplants the original story in so many, and this is very, very typical of Disney. Another really good example outside of Jungle Book, again, Beauty and the Beast, right? The original story is that Belle's dad was the king. And so now the ramifications of Belle, a princess, going and procreating and combining forces with this beast, that's way different than her dad is like some sort of like half-assed inventor, kind of like the dad from, Gremlins, that like can't quite make the right stuff, but he's an inventor anyways. It changes the whole dynamic, but Disney does that nonstop. And I don't know if y'all would say, like, I'll say the word neuter, but I don't know if that's the appropriate one, but like they kind of go through and neuter some of the stuff and take out like the really deep symbolism and change it a little bit. But I also feel like, that's, if you're cooking for your baby, right, you like cut up their mashed banana a little bit. You don't add any salt or sugar or anything, like when they don't have the palate that can kind of handle it. And I think that there's a level of that to Disney. And if you understand the source material and then you watch it, like they hit all the symbolism, right? They hit all the beats, but you wouldn't really pick up on any of it if you just saw the Disney version. If you just saw The Little Mermaid and didn't realize the real story of Little Mermaid wasn't about Ariel losing her voice and just falling in love with like a dude. It was that mermaids didn't have souls, and the only way that you could get your own soul and then live after you died was to find a human and fall in love with them, or more specifically, they fall in love with you, and then you kind of get this human experience of the soul, and then they're able to sort of jump into this concept of reincarnation. But before that, the original Hans Christian Andersen Ariel, if she died, then there's no soul left. So she just turns into fish food immediately. There's no continuity there whatsoever. So like that's a very profane and a very important aspect of the story, right? It's not like, oh, he's hot, I want to marry him, that wasn't the whole, and that's kind of, I'm simplifying it. That's the Disney version, but the original version, it even comes to at the end, he doesn't fall in love with her, and her family and friends are like, kill him. If you kill him, then then he won't get his soul either, or like it was very dark, right? Almost like all of the Grimm fairy tales were very dark, and then they get neutered a little bit by Disney. But I think that there's another, I want to say like ulterior or evil motive, but it's like this story that is a little bit dark doesn't have the same amount of shelf life as if it's just a perpetually evergreen story that you can tell forever. If it's more Aesop fables and less Grimm's fairy tales, then it can live longer and it has more opportunity. Like, I don't know how many people want to go to Disney World where every ride is based on a story where like someone loses their soul or dies or comes to a violent end, right? But if everything always works out in the end, well, now everyone wants to buy all the t-shirts and the popcorn and all the tickets for stuff. So I think he was very prophetic in that way. And again, is his manipulation of those stories unethical, or was it just the way he legitimately treated people, which was unethical, which is probably more that one.
Damn. Because you always can go back and find the original, right? You can always go look that up, but rarely people I don't know how many people do. I haven't read the original Beauty and the Beast. I mean, that's awesome that you know that.
And it's all of, and the older the movies, the more truer they were to some of that source material. Like Pinocchio is a great freaking one, but Santos and a bunch of people have talked on this about how Pinocchio means the pineal eye, like the pine eye. So Pinocchio.
Oculo. Yeah, you can picture Santos saying that. Pinocchio. Oculo.
I can't
Love
do
him,
it.
dude. He's great.
But like those ones, and also Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which is the first kind of feature-length Disney movie, and that one is a Rosicrucian tale. It starts out on Snow White shouting into a well with water that's reflecting her face. She's looking into a reflecting well, which is very symbolic of, folk magic in a way. She yells at it, and what she says to it is, I want this prince. And like immediately the prince shows up, right? So and then she runs away from the prince. And this is one of my favorite little tidbits on this one. And if you watch it through the Occult Disney lens and not just the viewer lens, as a normal person, you're like, oh, she got spooked by the guy because strong man and, meek woman, and she wasn't ready for all this. But really what she is scared of is she just proved to herself that she's magical as fuck. Like she just
her power
threw a spell out into a well and it immediately came true. She's like, holy shit, everything I know is wrong. And then has to like bail out on the situation to kind of come to terms with this. And this is further reinforced because now she can speak to animals, another very strong Disney motif. For almost every single protagonist has this ability to commune with nature in ways that other people in that same story don't, right? Like full-blown conversations or interpreting the language of the birds. Like, so Snow White, we've got magical incantations into reflecting pools, successful manifestation in the real world, reading the languages of birds, communing with nature, and then the seven dwarves, right? This is this Rosicrucian concept of earth elementals, which are, again, these soulless beings. They don't understand humanity or the human soul or ethics or any of that. They just know about the mundane world and the materialistic world. And that's why what they bring back to the surface are these gems that are hidden deep down in the darkness that humankind can't find by themselves. And they bring the gems back up to the surface and they exchange it with Snow White. Here's our gems in exchange for knowledge and this human soul. So again, it's this story, just like Little Mermaid, that they took out, but it's like Snow White represents humanity and consciousness and enlightenment, and these other, these dwarves represent sort of like the natural chaos of Earth, and like that communion of the two is where like the magic, all the Disney magic kind of comes from. But you don't get that unless you read the source material, but then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, cool. And in the movie, the whole thing about and like Sleeping Beauty is another good example. Sleeping Beauty, the whole payoff is that she gets woken up by the kiss from the prince, right? That wasn't even the headliner in the original book. That was kind of added later on by Disney.
Well, it's creepy too. Like you don't kiss a sleeping person, right?
In the 50s, you did.
Oh,
it wasn't
okay.
that. Yeah, right.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's weird.
Slip a Mickey and everything's off the table.
Oh, God.
But I'm so again, like I guess the point of the whole Occult Disney is showing that, yeah, the movie on its surface is, kind of juvenile and kiddie, and it has some symbolism, but if you know the source material and you know what changed, that kind of makes all the difference to me. The Beauty and the Beast one is like one of the biggest ones for me, and then the Little Mermaid one is another big one.
It'd be fascinating is if you did the real stories and did them, the Paranoid Americans' Beauty and the Beast, instead of Disney's Beauty and the Beast, but you told the true story about it and then maybe even went a little bit further into the implications of said story, maybe even referring as a joke, breaking the fourth wall a little bit about the Disney version, being such a horrible misinterpretation, and maybe even sidebarring off a little bit. And like I said, I don't know, it would be an awesome project because you're so knowledgeable about this, and I'm hungry for this information, man. Like, I don't want to know what the fucking whatever else is going on in the world right now. I want to talk to you about this. This is fascinating to me.
Well, here is some of the nefarious part, if we get into the nefarious, because it is out there, right?
Yeah, let's go.
And it's that now Disney owns nostalgia for all of these folk tales. So let's say that we did get together and we did a Snow White retelling or a Cinderella retelling. it's a sad reality, but no matter how you draw that Snow White, if it's not the Disney Snow White, it looks like a bootleg. You know what I mean? Like, they own the branding of these stories that are essentially baked into our DNA. If you believe in like epigenetic or like Lamarckian, passing down knowledge genetically or through osmosis, but like, they're able to kind of buy in on that stock of something that's going to live on way beyond any of us, to the point where if I say Pinocchio, like, what image do you get in your head? Are you getting the Disney image of Pinocchio, or are you getting the original Italian newspaper satirist political activist? Probably not that one. You know what I mean? And we can go down the line with every single story that Disney has touched, and they kind of own that image. So, like, yeah, you can do a retelling, like Daily Wire. I think they're trying to do their own Snow White. I think that kind of like addresses this, but now it's like Disney changed things. This is the maybe nefarious part, just a genius, right? But if I change the story of Little Mermaids, so now it's about she loses her voice and she wants to fall in love, and it's all about true love, and it's not about losing your soul and needing to get one from a human. Now, if you tell the real story, it feels like the real one is the B version. That's the blood and honey B movie, right? But if you try to sort of like recycle or capitalize on the nostalgia people have seen from the original one, now you might be up for a lawsuit because Disney's like, like in that fork in the road, we took a right and we saw that you took a right there too. So how many lawyers do you got on your payroll? Because I got about 10,000, So I think that that's the nefarious aspect, is that now they can fight to keep their control over real estate in everybody's brain. And that I feel is the unethical area. Like, if you've spent my entire life pushing images of, DuckTales and Mickey and Donald, just all that, like, I didn't necessarily consent to all that, and I couldn't protect myself from just the onslaught of programming, and I embraced it, and I shouldn't be persecuted for embracing that. And if I want to regurgitate that and take those things that you forced me to see and repurpose them and retell them and reuse them in my own way, I think that should be totally on the table. I don't think there should be any. I'm definitely in a minority when it comes to intellectual property law, but I strongly feel that deep down to my core. Like, I own He-Man just as much as anyone that aired it on TV or wrote it does, and I've got just as much right to Mickey Mouse as anyone at Disney does. Now, obviously, I'm not going to publish Mickey Mouse flat out because I don't want to get sued over it, but I think ethically and morally and just as the natural order of things, I do. I feel like I own just as much of Mickey Mouse as anyone else does.
And it's interesting you say the apprehension is what it sounds like is what's occurring here. And so it sounds like the stories Disney chose to apprehend. Do you think that they were chosen on purpose to be squashed and to be neutered, as you said, which is, I think, a perfect description of it, because there's something real deep hidden within those specific stories? Like, you alluded to a few, but it seems that, do you feel that the stories they chose were to be neutered on purpose?
I think on purpose, but not from a nefarious standpoint, which might be disappointing to anyone that's like, where's the conspiracy at? But it's more like, if you're casting this net and you've got, these 50 different stories that are from different time periods and cultures. I mean, a lot of it is Germanic, right? A lot of it comes from Grimm, but even Grimm themselves were just a compilation of stories that they themselves collected from different regions. So it's not like there's this infinite coherency between all the different folk story tales. So then, in order to give them all that Disney thing, that branding, so when you go and see it and it feels Disney, it requires you to just chop off all those rough edges and remold it in a certain way that fits, just like anything would do. If Marvel tried to retell any of these stories, like, someone at some point is in the editing room cutting things off and suggesting changes, right? It happens on every single creative endeavor. So Disney turned that into a assembly line process in a way. Like, he found a formula that worked and just kept applying it. And when he was running the show, it was just like, no, like, we're telling this story in this way. And he got into a lot of, there was a lot of animosity towards Walt himself and the animators, but he was kind of the biggest and only game in town. So it was a very interesting dynamic there. But he had, absolute control, like micromanaging levels of control over a lot of those early films.
Do, why do you think that is? Do you think he was just a control freak, or there was something very specific like Kubrick where he was obsessive about his work, but to the degree where it had to be specific because he was sending very specific messages? Do you think that that's what Disney's obsession was, or do you think he was just obsessed?
A little bit of both. I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know if I would put Disney on the same level of Kubrick, but also they were their own independent geniuses for sure. But Disney seemed way more like he had a vision and no one else got his vision. They just didn't understand, and it seemed like he was very frustrated that people would constantly be trying to talk him out of some wall. That doesn't make any sense. Wall, that would cost too much money. And he'd look around and be like, people have been saying that to me my entire life. Before I gave you the job and the property that you're standing on that's mine to tell me that this is crazy, right? Like that, all I was doing were crazy things and it was working out. So I could imagine the frustration of someone being on this next level and just everyone being like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Stop what you're doing. Like, slow down so we can understand. And like, imagine if Tesla, right?
Yeah,
Nikola Tesla had a whole bunch of
about.
groupies that were just like, Tesla, like, wait, let us understand first before we tell you if that's a good and he's just like millions of light years ahead of them and what he's thinking of. So I think
that's why he worked alone, Tesla.
I mean, I think that he was unbearable to be around as a person. Okay. He didn't like fat people. Like he was like anti-fat. He was anti-body hair. If he saw just like stray pieces of hair somewhere, he'd like freak out over this kind of stuff. He had OCD. He would like walk around a building multiple times. He'd have to turn lights on and off, like legit OCD. So
like Howard Hughes style. I mean, it seems something like this obsessive genius.
Without the money. Right. Imagine Howard Hughes that's always asking you for money. It's a different Howard Hughes, right?
Yeah. But it's an interesting thing, this obsessive compulsiveness. It's like almost challenged to operate in normal day-to-day, but they contribute so much, it seems, in this sense of the true mysteries and these amazing things that we seek here, just at a real deep level. So what do you think that is? Do you think that culture's been deliberately dumbed down so that even brains and minds and souls like that run around and appear on this realm are just so out there that we aren't capable of taking in their true genius or utilizing the gifts that they're giving us?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. I don't know. I don't think that we're deliberately dumbed down to be dumbed down deliberately. I just think that the policies that get put in place that make things convenient in the short term turn out to be just horrible in the long term. But ego reigns, and no one can ever admit that they made a horrible mistake that ruined like the education of the country in like short amounts of time. And humans are so great at doubling down on stuff, like that whole logical, like the sunk cost fallacy. That one's a hard one. It feels so ingrained, and it almost feels like all the logical fallacies, they're all things that you'd be like, yeah, my gut tells me this, my gut feels like it's telling me this thing. And it's like, well, like, that's cool, but that's actually a logical fallacy that you might be falling into. And that's why being informed on, like, this is the study of like logic and grammar and rhetoric, right? Like the logic is the logical fallacy aspect. And once you know these things, this is like knowing NLP, or like we were talking about before, is it bad to like weaponize charisma or, like manipulate people? Well, like if you know the rules, at least now you can have some like Taekwondo going on where maybe you're not going to kick somebody's ass, but you can probably see it coming and dodge it or redirect it, or just know like, oh, the way that person's walking, they're looking for a fight. And the same way in this space, it's like, oh, the way that they're phrasing things, the way that they're speaking, like they're looking for a fight or they're looking for this or that. So I think that like just understanding all that backstory, it gives you way more, I don't know, information to pick up on all those cues, all the way down to watching Disney movies and reading the source material, right? Like all that extra context, it helps you see stuff coming from way, way more. So things don't kind of like catch you off guard.
Beautiful. What are your thoughts, just shifting gears? Speaking of Segue here. What are your thoughts on NASA? I'm curious about what you think is going on. Do you think have you weighed in, or just your thoughts or curiosities about the flat Earth, round Earth ball thing, or realm Earth, or what the fuck NASA's role in all this is, or what's your beef with NASA?
You would call it globetard. I think that's
globetard. Okay, the official title. Okay.
So I'm not all in on flat Earth. I know that's a lot disappointing to some people. I get people that are constantly trying to convince me, like, oh, just watch this video. This will be the one that'll
be the one that does it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I guess again, like in the Socratic, annoying way of answering a question with a question. But my favorite one that I've been defaulting to until someone pokes a flaw in it. But like, why does infinite land or an infinite plane make any more or less sense than an infinite space? Right. So if we're on a ball that has a finite amount, but then you can just go out for infinity, usually a lot of flat earthers are like, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. So the alternate is that we're on a plane that doesn't have an edge. It just goes on for infinity. That feels even less, or at least equally supernatural to me as any other explanation. So we're kind of right back where we started. So at that point, the flat earth versus round earth doesn't win in any logical conclusion. So like, what else do you want to appeal to me to? And I feel like there's maybe speaking out of turn, this is my subjective bias, but there's a weird overlap between flat earth and very like religious people that believe that, God created me and put me on this domain and I own this domain. Because if this is all there is and it goes on forever, then we kind of do get to become kings of all that there is. But if the second you're like, actually, I'm just this tiny grain of sand, if you zoom out, like there's planets for infinity and I'm nothing, that's a totally different perspective than I guess like a lot of classical religions where we're sort of, centric, very human centric universe that they all portray. So there's some of that overlap that doesn't appeal to me either. So that one hasn't sucked me in. And then there's another appeal that like everything you've ever been taught in school is wrong. And I get that feel, like I get the like rebellious version of that. But I also feel like there's a justification where if someone had a rough time in school, understandably, or didn't do well in school or was frustrated because it made them feel lesser than, and then they come out and they're presented with all these theories. It's like, hey, guess what? That 15 years you spent in school and hated every day and were always getting in trouble and they made you feel like an idiot? Well, they were all idiots because dinosaurs aren't real and the earth is flat and Copernicus didn't, if you just say all this stuff and it's like, oh, well, of course, that's why I failed all my pop quizzes, because Copernicus didn't even exist. Like, I was smart all along. So, and I'm being like a little bit facetious to make the point there, but that's the other end of the extreme, right? So I feel like I haven't gotten that appeal either. Like, I do believe that history has lied to us, but I don't think it is so expansive that the shape of the planet and that NASA has set up holograms and that everything we're fed is a lie. Because then the other argument is, well, NASA takes a picture, but it's really just computers that are making like things that you can't see into things that you can see. Like, have you ever heard of the human eye? Like, kind of what the human eye does, right? It takes like light bouncing off of like different solid things of matter, and then based on the frequencies of those reverberations, and our brain puts it together. So I mean, like, nothing is real. So anyways, that's NASA, I think, is a real company. They really send things out into space. Space is real. Some of the pictures they sent is real. But man, they probably are like a charity that spends 99% on administrative costs and like 1% on the thing that they're supposed to be doing. And then when you ask them to check for their receipts, they're like, oh, we taped over that.
Yeah.
That's what I think about NASA. They are outdated and probably, if anything, just hemorrhaging money and being worse for space exploration than they originally were supposed to.
And they have the monopoly on it pretty much. I mean, everything has to go through NASA. They say even all the foreign space agencies, it's still got NASA's name on it somewhere. That sticker's on that rocket. It's
or the government in some capacity. Like, yes. I don't think there's anyone just setting up their own completely private. There was one that was supposed to be a space airport called Spaceport America that was in Cruces, New Mexico, right outside Truth or Consequences.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be where you would go if you were like SpaceX or Virgin Galactic and you want to go and do this. But even then, like, you have to get the approval by the state and the federal government in order to do it.
And that's the question. Why is it so? And this is like the thing with me and the whole official story and everything is that because it's the official story and because it's pushed so hard, it just makes the other so damn appealing. Because all the other stories they're telling us are just that, stories. I find very little truth in what they're saying. Me personally, in my observation of what they're saying at large capacities. And then when you step back and you can say, well, if they're lying about that, why would they be telling you the truth only about this? But because the psychology of it is such a better apprehension in my mind than telling you flat out that that's, pun intended, flat out, that there's an expansive place here and that you're in sort of a shit realm. And yeah, maybe you graduate whenever you die from here and you're sort of pulled up above the ice wall and they're like, okay, dude, great job. You were there. Now you're going to go here and you're going to be an Arcturian and you're going to get a spaceship and shit. What I think is interesting is all the things that you're gaslit against, especially if we talk about like astrology, just bring something into the mix. People are gaslit against astrology. Oh, don't ever use astrology. It's bullshit. It's hoodoo and whatever. But every sitting president has had an astrologer. I found it very valuable in my life. If you're, and heads up to anybody out there, if you're around 38, 40, check where Pluto is in your chart and see when it's about to square and take about 2 months out of your life and just fucking do nothing. Turn your phone off so you can't contact anyone and just go live your life somewhere else for a little bit. Those things are valuable, but they're gaslit against us. So again, the official stories and narratives wrapped up in this stuff, this is why we're never a straight answer. All the fucking symbolism wrapped up into it. It seems like there's so many dodgems going on with that, and it's such an orchestration that's where I find that where they put the most effort is where I think that they're faking the biggest. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess my biggest apprehension with this is that I know how susceptible I am to be like, look at what they're doing over there. They're the bad ones. All the good guys are over here doing this. It's like this propensity to go and do that. And it's so easy to ignore options, C, D, E, F, and G, and all the other ones out there. And the whole like enemy of my enemy is my friend mentality, which becomes really big. This one was like a strange one for me because I remember I watched Alex Jones in the late 90s, early 2000s before he started on his Ultimate Warrior sort of era, right? And there was this one show and it was interesting because he was secular to begin with. He wasn't like a Bible thumper at all. And he would even bring up a lot of the time, like, I'm not religious, but I know people that are, and I don't have anything. Like he would kind of like make these little claims. And this one show, this is early 2000s, maybe like 2002 or something. I'm just very hazy in my military days. But I remember this show, and he basically said, I think I'm going to become a Christian. And it's not necessarily because I like spoke to God or had some kind of like an epiphany, but it's just that all the research that I'm doing, this is Alex Jones talking, not me, that all the research that I'm doing keeps pointing to these elites worshiping these like, evil demons and devils and summoning these like horrible entities. And there's just so consistent about all this that I'm finding, Bohemian Grove and Illuminati and like all of them, like Skull and Bones, that if they believe in this so much, then maybe there's something to it. And if there's something to it, it's almost like the inverse Pascal's wager, right?
Yep,
it's less of like, I might as well believe because I don't want to get spanked at the end for not believing, so I might as well just hedge my bet. This is like, damn, dude, like they are way into this. Maybe I should get some protection. Maybe I should pick up a Bible, get some holy water, some wooden stakes. I don't know. So I remember watching him say that on this one show, and like that was this like cusp. But I don't know if I've hit that yet. Because I remember even thinking at the time was like, I don't want like the reason that I become spiritual or follow some kind of thinking is just as a reactionary response.
Spite, yeah.
To other thing, it feels Hegelian. It feels like a Hegelian dialectic where you've got this like, Bohemian Grove guy moving chess pieces around. It's like, haha, we had him repel from this side to go to this side. It's all going as planned.
And this is something I've talked about on the show, is this idea that really this whole orchestration of 2020 and all that was for this ascension, right? I don't necessarily feel this way anymore. It's for this ascension where it really like shook everybody up, and it was taking too long because everybody was too pumped about the Real Housewives of whatever and doing all that shit. And they weren't looking at themselves, and they weren't quitting drinking or, doing the shadow work or anything. So the matrix or the system that operates this place that knew inevitably and could feel this ascension occurring, but knew that it would take us to run it, sort of this, again, idea, that it would be then ushering us on by sort of this snap wake up rather than an ease into that we've had over the past however many decades that this allegedly transference to Age of Aquarius, if again you follow that sort of thinking, goes. Now, to what you said about the inverse, and I completely agree with you about this. It's fascinating, though. Do you think it's possible that it's on such another level that the inverse itself is presented, that the inverse that's presented is so juxtaposed, but it's the same damn thing? We could see microcosms of this. Democrats, Republicans, we give this analogy of the two wings of the same bird. They're fighting each other, but it's so that it's a whirlpool for your mind to just get stuck in and argue and throw little bullets from one side to the other, and you never run out of ammunition in that whirlpool. It actually only gets bigger. You can scale this up to anything here, and religion is absolutely one of these. So then the question is what's it all for? Like, what's all the dangling keys? What's all of this shit for? And to this, I'll ask you, have you looked into the work of like the Gnostics, the Cathars, people, Mark Passio, Howdy Mikowski, guys like that, Tony Sayers, that talk about sort of the other side of these concepts, again, going back to more of what the Cathars and Gnostics believed, which is that this is a fucking copy of a good realm. This isn't that. This is actual hell. You can see it all around you. And so therefore, any system here is of this Rex Mundi or this demiurge, and all of it was created by Satan, essentially. And so even when you go, oh no, I don't want to go to Bohemian Grove, and you run to Jesus, Jesus is laughing his ass off because him and Satan hang out together. The same two, again, this idea of two wings of the same bird, and it's scalable, so it's everything. What are your thoughts on that? And that there's like an energy loosh farm, really, is what it.
Well, I mean, that's the ultimate thought, is an energy loosh farm, and remind me to tell you about Vril Housewives after.
Oh, awesome! Are you doing this? The Vril Housewives? Okay, thank you.
But to go to your question, my favorite analogy is something that I'm pretty sure I heard Jordan Maxwell say at some point. And
shout out
to paraphrase him, because I can't do him justice, but he's talking about if you go to court and you see the two lawyers that are battling against each other, you've got the prosecutor and defender. At the end of the day, when court's over, right, they see each other in a bar, like they might have a drink with each other. There's a much better chance that they will have a drink with each other than the prosecutor would have a drink with someone he was, acting on behalf of, or the defender, having a drink with his client, because they have almost nothing in common. They come from two different class systems. Like they couldn't be more different, whereas the lawyers themselves are two peas in a pod. So now extrapolate, and he also describes this in terms of like a basketball team. You've got two rival teams and they're at, the final playoffs. And after the game's over, on the court, they're rivals. They're like arch enemies. They need to defeat each other. After the game's over and everyone's gotten their paychecks and everything, are they going to go have a beer with each other more likely? Or are they going to go have a beer with some rando in the crowd that was like wearing their hat, right? They still have more in common with their fellow professional NBA player than they do with you. So like they're playing against each other, but they're still in the same game. And in that context, they're working together to stay in the game because they don't want to be in the audience. They want to be in the game. And I think that's kind of the same thing when you say like the left and the right wing, or the Democrats and Republicans. Democrats and Republicans, like if they were to ever become bipartisan and like just like cross the aisle, it would be when the general public like came to put their heads on pikes. They'd be like, okay, we're in this together, guys. Then it becomes the Congress and the senators versus the Republic, essentially. So I think those are the real classes, and that's the words, the wings of the bird isn't necessarily like in opposition, like a bird needs two wings in order to fly. So,
but they flap in unison for it to do so.
Right, and then, there's some cohesion between the two.
Right, and that's the thing.
The bird's in on it too. Oh,
yeah,
man.
I know.
It's not just the wings.
They're not real. They're not real anyway. And that's the thing, though. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? That it is the whole goddamn thing. Literally, pun intended. It's the whole goddamn thing, because this is not a real reality. You know what I mean? Do you have that feeling of you where you look around and you say, hang on, everything to survive here, something has to die for every single creature here. Everything. And most of the time in a horrific way. Not if you're lucky, but it's rare. So it's just interesting when you apply this lens, because then it starts honestly to answer more questions that I have about this place, more issues cognitively. And I don't think I've been programmed into those. It's some deep-seated, like, I use the analogy of the princess and the pea. Like, if you've heard that story, of course. Shit ton of mattresses. How many mattresses exactly? Do you remember from the story?
I don't remember if the number was actually
Shit ton,
significant.
I think. Yeah. But it was a lot. And there's a little pea under the bed and under the bottom 2 mattresses, right? And that princess slept horribly that night, and that's the one he chose. And it's because of this, I think, attention to detail. Your inability to see the illusions here as comfort. You see, yeah, I'm on a shitload of mattresses, but there's a pea at the very bottom of it, and that tanks the entire experience. And so for me, again, when I look around at this and I see the 2 wings flapping, and I see it as an energetic suck, and that's how I can't unsee it this way, is that I see like those that participate in that have these archons floating above them that are just sucking this fucking shit out of them because they're playing that game. They're a part of that system and structure. And it's interesting that, again, we're gaslit into thinking that we're like the best thing out there, that we're top of the food chain and all that. But again, that seems in my mind a false sense of security whenever viewed again through this lens. And it seems like the best prison to have is where the prisoner doesn't know that they're in it. And so the fewer people that run around thinking, oh my God, I'm being fed on, and all the things that I enjoy here that I've been programmed to enjoy. I don't actually enjoy them. I've been, programmed into this. It's just interesting, again, when you look at it like that. What are your thoughts on it? Like that the whole goddamn thing is this demiurge copy and it's a hell realm, and really our ultimate goal is to not be attached to anything here and get the fuck out.
I think it makes some sense. I don't know any of the names that you mentioned, all like the Gnostic.
I'll send you some stuff, dude.
Or researchers and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've read enough like intro to Gnostic texts and been on enough podcasts, I guess, that I get like a very vague idea that, yeah, Sophia is this like embodied knowledge, and she kind of is like coerced into creating this extra reality through the demiurge, and that the reason that we are flawed is because we come from a flawed creator, and that if we were actually created from a real God, like the true pure God,
Pinocchio,
then no one would have any faults and nothing. But I mean, I don't believe in utopias either, so that sounds like a very utopian, like the inverse of the Gnosticism, or like the part that they're explaining is why isn't everything just absolutely perfect? Well, because in an absolutely perfect system, it's basically in complete stasis, right? It's just like humming around at like Aum, right? It's just a 432 hertz frequency in perpetuity forever and no variation whatsoever. So I think that ultimately, maybe this is the wrong way of hearing this, but we were asking is like, did Hitler have to exist? And I think that, yeah, maybe he did have to exist at some point because, the good with the bad, the setting the ends of the spectrum and all of this. It's a hard question to answer though, right? Because if there is a demiurge or whatever you apply that in the practical way, not like the storybook way, but it explains why imperfection exists in absence of this explanation of a perfect God. Because I think that's the answer they're trying to answer, right? Is like, if God's perfect, why are we not perfect? Like, why are we with flaw? Didn't he see ahead of it? And it's because, oh, well, you weren't really created by God. You were kind of created by the knockoff God, the Daily Wire version of God. Yeah. Like, that's the one that you got. And they got some quirks to them, right? Like, have you ever heard Ben Shapiro talk? Like, there's some quirks. Overall, there's some consistency, but, it's not 100% perfect. So yeah, I'm calling Ben Shapiro the demiurge, I guess.
I can hear that. That's awesome, and I'm not refuting you. I don't know enough about the man to say so. So I'm not going to defend something I don't know. We're just going to go with the side with the guest on this one. That's fine. It is though an interesting sort of wool to pull over the eyes, and I think that whenever I really step back from this idea and looked around, it's because of how many things out here are desperate for your attention. And whenever you talk about things like Snow White, what it was really the attention they were getting. That's what they were sucking from her soul, right, in that sense. And same thing with these entities that have no what we would call soul or divine light, something that, again, is this sort of elitist mindset anyway, which I agree. Like, I'm not claiming that this is what's going on. I'm just saying that it's an interesting lens to view the world through whenever you start to consider it and then apply it around. You're just like, holy shit, okay. I can, because you can think of transformations in your own life where you could say, man, I think I was possessed by something, or that was, people say it all the time, that wasn't me, or I said something and that wasn't me. I acted away and that wasn't me. You can do this when you black out. And I know that's a chemical observation of that, but really, like, it's a mini sort of missing time experiment with yourself to where you get this blackout drunk. Something takes over. you may call it the subconscious, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's an entity that rides you around and enjoys the ride. Because I've also thought, if this is some sort of realm or whatever this place is, if there is sort of a divine spark or something that's animating us, are you in the camp that that's sort of what's going on, that we are sort of occupied by some divine spark of some kind? Consciousness,
Yeah, I think
if you want to
so.
call it.
I mean, for lack of specific words, but yeah.
Enough to continue.
I mean, the two questions that are very superficial. One is, why is there something rather than nothing?
Right.
That one's a really big one. So that whatever you want to call divine spark, but that is the reason why there is something rather than nothing. Why isn't it just infinite void and nothing moving around? Because Occam's razor, right? That would probably be the simplest sort of path for reality, just that nothing exists, because stuff existing is pretty complicated, way more complicated than the opposite of that, I think. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other one is just like, I guess, like interacting with other animals and nature and stuff. Like there's something more there than just, bits and boops and like factual information being exchanged. There's like some other level of experience that I think. So yeah, it's about as woo-woo as I'll get on that particular subject, I guess.
It's great. But then the question is do you think that our physical bodies then, because a lot of people say this, that kind of attached to this idea that you're not your body. This is a vehicle that you're driving around. Would you say that this is temporary in that way, then that your consciousness continues on? So basically this is just sort of a lender to do what you want to do while you're here?
Maybe there's I can't remember the book. I think it was called The Cartesian Voyage that I did with Juan on Occult Book Club. But they're trying to summarize how Rene Descartes was coming to his conclusion that the soul lives in the pineal gland. And I'm not going to go, it's like a long ass book and they go all these different arguments. But the coolest part that I remembered was that he's making this argument for that your soul can't be in your arm. And if it's not in your left arm, then it can't be in your right arm. And if it can't be in your arms, then it can't be in your legs. And why do you say that the soul can't be in your arm? Well, because you could lose both of your arms and still be at your full soulful capacity, right? And then you might have like the ghost limb thing going on, but for sure, like the soul wasn't in your arm because you continue to be you without the arms. So apply that to pretty much every different appendage. You cut your ears off, cut your nose off. You could cut almost every part of your body off, except for like your vital organs, right? And your head. And then you'd start running into problems with the rest of the experiment, but it would be hard to track down exactly where that's at. So as he's going through the deep explanations about why your soul's not in your arm, he has this example of, think of a blind man, and a blind man has a stick or a cane, right? And after he uses it enough, like that becomes part of his sense. So like for me and you, like if I touch the microphone, I feel it on my fingertip, and that's like the loop that I've created in my reality, is that when I touch something, I figure out what that is. For someone that's blind, that cane is their fingertips. So when they tap grass and they tap wet mud, or they tap something that's hard, like that frequency, that vibration that's traveling up, they're feeling it just as acute as you might feel like the tip of a needle or something, right? Like they feel all that texture and all that information. Now, if you take that cane away, now I'm holding it, right? Is your soul in this cane? It can be. Like there's no way that your soul's in that cane. So just if you follow that to its logical sort of conclusion, then the soul in Rene Descartes' mind could only be in the pineal gland because it was like dead center in the brain. So that if you were to cut off everything from the head down, right? And then it couldn't be in like the left side of your brain or the right side of your brain because that would be imbalanced. So he basically said it has to be in this epicenter, and that's where it sticks out. So the answer that I was getting to, that was that cane, right? That cane doesn't have the soul in it, but it becomes an appendage of you, just like the rest of your body follows suit, right? So everything that's part of your physical body is no more than a cane that you're using to tap around and stuff. So it'd probably be very attached, just like a blind person probably be really attached to their cane. If you took it away from them, they'd feel like they were blind all over again, they lost part of their body. But it's not really the case.
So what if somebody did that experiment? We talk about this brain in a vat idea. And what if a technology or a creature or something like that took over some sentient beings, cut their brain down to pineal glands and is storing them in some device and, simulating this reality? And maybe that's really
Matrix.
what the simulation. Yeah.
Yeah, or a million other movies are on that.
A million other. Dark City is badass. I know you've seen that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I feel like that is in my mind, it's a conversation ender, not a starter. Just because it's like, dude, what if we're all living in a simulation?
Right.
Like, you can kind of just mic drop and walk out of the room, right? Because anything you say is just part of the simulation. So I don't even have to sit here for it. Like I gave you the truth. We're done here. So that's why I don't like the solipsism argument as much. But I think it is probably one of the more realistic ones. Is that like, yeah, we're all just little brains. I mean, if you think about it, we really are. Like, I am a brain that's just floating around in space, right? Everything else is like an input device, right? These are my ocular sensory input devices and my olfactory sensory input device. But you can take all of those input devices away from somebody, and you still have a somebody in there. So it's weird that like how would you do that experiment, right? Like, we're gonna just slowly remove you bit by bit, like ship of Theseus, and tell us when you stop being you.
I don't think it's on a voluntary system. It's probably not on a
no,
voluntary
it wouldn't be
basis.
a voluntary system.
It's if it was voluntary, it'd be who wants to go first. Oh no, you have to do it, but which one of you wants to go first? And that's why also I was curious to ask then on that same line of questioning is then do you feel that what drives us, this divine spark, is the only thing out there, or that these vehicles that we're just temporarily using that can be, maybe we're located, whatever is driving this thing, our consciousness, we'll just call it that, whatever consciousness this is that we think is what we call human, is just driving this body around, but also there's many other things that can tap into a human body with their own agenda that come from somewhere else. Do you think that that's possible?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in ghosts or demons or angels per se, so no, I don't think so.
Perfect. All right, well, we were going to crap it there anyway, but please, if you don't mind, sir, send us off with something you're excited about and what gets you up every morning.
Oh, I mentioned my Real Housewives, which is right now
please.
the conceptual stage. I'll spill it. If someone wants to steal it, I don't care. Go for it. It's not easy. It takes a long time to make a comic. So the concept is called Vril Housewives, VRIL, and it's basically that reality's show is just a loosh farm, and that they know that it's a loosh farm, and that's exactly what they're doing. So the Vril Housewives is a comic that takes place sort of behind the scenes of the Real Housewives of Bohemian Grove. So all the husbands go off to do their summer encampment, and it's just like the wives that are left over to be catty, but they're actually summoning real Vril and having them come into our reality. And the main star that gets invited to the show that we follow around as a protagonist, she's new to this world, kind of uncovers it, tries to reveal it on live television, and then finds out some even crazier reality that's like beyond just the Vril running things. So that's just an idea that I've been cooking up. I'm hot to trot on it, but like I'll say it now and it'll be done in maybe like 3 years from now. So
it's brilliant. I love that even more. It kind of made me think of, I don't know if you're going this direction of it, but it made me think more of Bohemian Grove is just sort of like a summer camp for their husbands to get them out of the house so that they can do the real magic. These women, witchy goddesses. Is that really what it is?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
like,
I mean,
boys.
Because they're the ones that are actually running the show.
That's what I got from it. Dude, that's badass. I fucking love this. I can't wait. All right, well, we will look forward to that. And in the meantime, guys, check out his YouTube. Definitely check out the Occult Disney series. Everything you do is awesome. We're in love with you, brother. So, excuse me, come back any damn time. And just thanks again for this, dude.
Thank you, man. It's always awesome talking to you. I appreciate it.